Hi everyone, my name is Umang Barman. I lead marketing here at Balbix, and we're excited to welcome you to this webinar. We're just giving folks a couple of minutes to join. Meanwhile, just stay put, and we're excited to get started. We'll just give one more minute for folks to join in, and want to make sure that people get to hear the maximum amount of this webinar. So thanks for your patience, everyone. All right. Once again, for the folks who are just joining in, we're gonna start in just a minute. Thanks for joining this webinar. We're excited to kick off with some excellent ideas, insights, guests that we have lined up. So thank you all for joining, and we appreciate the time you want to spend with us today. All right. We are just at 2 minutes past 8 o'clock, so we'll get started. Hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Umang Barman. I run marketing here at Balbix. Super excited to welcome you. I know we have a third of the audience today that's coming international, so welcome from different parts of the world. We are here, all the guests here are on the Pacific time zone, bright and early to welcome you. So today, we have this interesting topic, which is about making Gen AI work for cybersecurity. This is a topic that we've heard over and over again from a lot of our prospects, a lot of our customers, other security leaders who want to know just how they can use Gen AI in their use cases, various cybersecurity use cases, where they should get started, how they should get started. And so we wanted to put this webinar to synthesize these insights from prospects and customers that we have heard, but also from our own lessons building an AI assistant. And we have the person who built it here, Mr. Vinay Sridhara, who's going to walk us through and give us some insights and learnings from what he learned in that process. So we're excited about sharing all these insights, but before that, I also wanted to welcome the team, the person who are really the genesis of Gen AI. We welcome Vijay from Nvidia. But Vijay, thanks for joining us. Vijay leads various business initiatives within the company. And we also have two other guests from Balbix, Gaurav, CEO and founder of Balbix, and Vinay, who's the CTO of Balbix. So before we get started, Vijay, why don't you quickly introduce yourself?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are. Excited to be here. Vijay Rangnatpura. I work with strategic AI startups, helping enabling through Nvidia from all the way from product tech integration to go to market funding. So it's kind of a one show stop for strategic AI startups, including one of them, Balbix. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Vijay. And then we have Gaurav. Gaurav, why don't you introduce yourself too? You're on mute. Oh, you need a big cup of coffee too.
Thank you. Well, first of all, welcome everybody to our webinar, and thank you, Vijay. I'm the founder and CEO of Balbix, and we started on a journey with Nvidia many years ago, and we've learned a lot of different things. So very excited to share that today.
Awesome. And then finally, we have Vinay. Vinay, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Yep. Thank you, Umang, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining. I'm very excited to actually share what we have learned in AI for the last 9 years, in Gen AI for the last year and a half. Yeah, looking forward to this.
Awesome. So we have a packed agenda. We have a ton of questions that I wanted to pose to our panelists here and extract as much information as we can. But just a quick housekeeping items. This is meant to be useful to the folks who are here. So you, the audience, please use the Q&A bar at the bottom of your screen to enter any questions. We'll take them as we go. I have obviously consolidated a few questions based on what we have heard commonly from our customers, and we'll start going through them now. But please feel free to enter your questions, and I'll pick them up as we go along. So my first question, just to kick things off and warm things up, and maybe start with an easy question on GenAI. I'll start with Gaurav because you put out this wonderful blog very recently, which I personally enjoyed reading, which is about, GenAI in general has obviously moved very fast in the last 2 years. We started with almost nothing really with ChatGPT 3.5, some million parameters, and now we're talking about a billion, 100 billion parameters, reasoning models, and whatnot. The main question that people ask us is, okay, we'd love to get started. What should we be aware of? Are there any limitations for cybersecurity that we should be aware of? How would you frame that?
So the way I think first off, it's unkind to say GenAI is only a year and a half old. That name certainly is a year and a half old, but if you go back to 2015, 2016, we go back to the ancestors of GenAI, sequence to sequence deep learning, and then tensor to tensor deep learning, and then generally transform models, which happened. And then transform models became, uh, generative pre-trained transform models, which are just very large language models. And that's what we call GenAI, right? And so if you go back to the journey of it, and then you say, well, what does GenAI give you? And what GenAI gives you is essentially, it gives you capabilities that are very similar to one part of what our brain is all about. So our brain, as many people believe, has two distinct set of capabilities. One set of capabilities related to pattern matching and language, and this is called the System One. Danny Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for creating this distinction. He kind of framed it up very well. There is a System One, which operates really, really fast. This is in tens of milliseconds. You can detect danger, and you can get out of trouble, and look for food and smell and things like that, right? And then there is the other part of the brain, which Danny Kahneman called System Two, which is the slow reasoning. It kind of verifies that the real world. It knows that the sun rises in the day and sets in the evening, and that is the ultimate truth, right? And sometimes it doesn't rise, and there are things like eclipses and things like that, right? So verification with the real world. If you hit a wall, you get pain, or something like that. If you hit a wall of cardboard, you get less pain. If you hit a wall of brick, you get more pain, right? So those are all the capabilities where you have what you call the logical part of the brain, which is System Two. And LLMs, or GenAI, and we'll use the terms interchangeably, what it really does is it starts doing an amazing job of your System One. And in many ways, it is much better because the amount of information that is available to, for example, ChatGPT is a lot more than what is available to, for example, a human being, and years of learning and all that. Right? I mean, how many books can you read? Okay, I can read 100 books a year or 50 books a year. Well, how many is that in a lifetime, right? ChatGPT does that every day and day in and day out. It has read everything, right? So that's so pattern matching capabilities of these large language models is clear. What is clearly not there, at least nothing even close to human intelligence, is the System Two. So when we talk about a question like what are the limitations, that's a good way to think about it, right? Which is that, is it something related to pattern matching? And a lot of things are just pattern matching, by the way, right? You might think that it is intelligent, but it's not really intelligent. It's pattern matching, right? And then is it really related to logical reasoning of the kind which can only be done with hard truth verification, interaction with the natural world, or interaction with your enterprise data? And that's really what GenAI cannot do today.
Awesome. We also have a question for the audience to get a little bit more insight into where our audience is coming from, just to understand where these use cases come from. So if the poll question comes up, I'd love for people to answer this question quickly, and we want to use just this anonymized response to provide further clarity on these questions. But to build on this question, um, Vinay, if I can direct the next question to you, now that we know there are some fundamental limitations with Gen AI, for somebody who's just getting started, somebody who may know all about the general model landscape because there is so much information out there, but now they're evaluating for cybersecurity. How would you recommend they get started? What's the landscape look like, just big picture wise, and how should they evaluate things?
Yeah. First, let's actually give the credit to where it's due, right? Let's take a step back. If somebody tells me that the LLM can't do something a week back, I question that today. Can the LLM not do that today, right? The pace of evolution in GenAI is staggering. It's lightning pace. So it's, I mean, again, attributed to our friends here at Nvidia who make it like possible to do this faster every day. I mean, like lower cost, all of those things, right? Just to take a step back for like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, right? Like GPT-4, Gemini, Claude, and Claude, I mean, Sonnet 3.5, Haiku, right? Mixtral, significant changes, significant improvements in reasoning, creativity, and memory, right? Which is phenomenal to see like how things are moving.
Mm-hmm.
And then add retrieval augmented generation on top of it. You can
Mm-hmm.
start adding your data to make the base models actually become a lot better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then now let's actually put the multimodal models on top of this. Images, text, voice becomes a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
It all seems like it has come together to a point where this is a intelligent system. Yes, it is actually getting to that point. But the to put it simply, the philosophy that I actually face every day is that of a philosopher versus an informed security agent, right? Today, the generative models that we have are like philosophers. They tell me generally what things are, but they don't tell me much about like what my system is. What should I be doing? It's like me going to a doctor and saying like I'm not feeling good, and the doctor actually gives me like 30 minutes of like generally what you should be doing. It's like, man, where is your stethoscope? Where is your x-ray? Where is your CT scan? This is the stuff that you need to be looking at from my perspective, right? So this is where I'm going to touch upon a little bit of like multi-agent models and all of those things as to like how this all comes together, right? The core problem, I would like to actually frame this as a philosopher who gives very intelligent, creative, general answers versus an informed agent that gives me answers that are specific to my needs, right? That is the core of the problem today. I mean, the cybersecurity landscape has evolved, right? Like a lot of people ask me, hey, how does Falcon do? How does CodeGen do? How does SecPalm do, right? They're all good. They're all trained on security data, but they're not trained on specific security data that is actually evolving every day. Threats are evolving every day, right? My systems are changing every day. So the key here is to actually make sure that you have a Gen AI model that is sitting on top of like a solid data fabric,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this data fabric is your data fabric. This is your enterprise data fabric.
Mm-hmm.
To have access to the enterprise specific data, leverage secure APIs for retrieval of information, use multi-agent systems to actually bring in the SOC information, the vulnerability information, the threat information, the IT information, inventory, all of these things. I mean, imagine making an informed decision on cybersecurity with all of these people in a room who have like perfect idea, and then they say like, here are the 10 issues that we need to solve in order to actually make our security better.
Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
is what the GenAI models should be doing. And this is what you should be looking for.
Yeah. So, and this is an open question to both Gaurav and Vinay and Vijay, if you want to chime in too. Like, I think this is what you said, Vinay. It's obviously makes sense. It's logical to bring all your data together. But I think for large companies, enterprise companies, I think often the people challenges get in the way. Some app owner wants to only work on their app and vulnerability teams. How do you break these silos? How do you bring this? It's obviously a data problem, but how do you solve for the people problem? Any sort of insights there to overcome?
I mean, the way you kind of want to look at it is like this, right? Human beings um, interact with each other, and they use language for that, right? That language is used to communicate information about a certain structure, which you might say is the organization, which describe the way the business happens, which describe the IT elements, the software installed. That is all structured, right? I mean, it's not non-deterministic. It can vary, it can change every day, but it's not non-deterministic, right? It is very I mean, if you look at a CFO's view of the business, it is, the accounting sheet and the money that goes out of the bank and the money that comes into the bank. It's very, very definite, right? If you look at IT person's perspective, there is a certain piece of software and a certain configuration on a system, and that doesn't change. Machines are involved and they communicate to each other in machine language and machine to machine communication. So the opportunity over here is, can we use the combination of Gen AI and structured AI in the appropriate way? And not necessarily as like Gen AI sits on top and structured AI sits on bottom, or they sit side by side. It's more like this, right? Which is that at every stage in every model, in every interaction, when you're looking at machine to machine interaction, machine to human interaction, or human to human interaction, use the most appropriate AI technology. Sometimes it'll be a specific structured AI algorithm, like probabilistic graphical models, and sometimes it'll be a large language model. Sometimes it'll be a small language model, right? And these are all within the appropriate logical guardrails of what you want to accomplish, right? Because if you try to accomplish everything, you will end up trying to be chasing a God product, which is just very, very hard to do. So it's much rather that you constrain your problems incrementally and say, this is what we're going to start with, this is what we're going to do next, this is what we're, that's really what the opportunity is.
Makes sense. So let me share some results from the survey. We had 15% people say, what's Gen AI? We had 30% people who suggested or asked or said they're doing their first pilot soon. Actually, give me a second. Let me buy some more Nvidia stock while I do this. And then we have several who said they have use cases in production. Vijay, is that surprising to you? Do you want to send this to your marketing team and say there's a lot more opportunity in market to go after?
Gen AI is evolving. I think Jensen keeps talking about like wave 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we are probably wave 1, 2 somewhere, and it's very, very early. I think there was a recent Gartner report wherein less than 5% enterprises have adopted Gen AI yet. So there's a long way to go. And again, there is every day, as Vivek was saying, there is some kind of new thing coming in, and there are always surprises, but in a good way. And how efficiently and effectively, Gen AI can help enable people's problem or make enterprises more efficient and effective. So I think it's an interesting phase and very exciting times for all of us. I mean, if I just pick an example as an analogy with medicine, like earlier people used to suffer with cancer, and it was very difficult, and times used to run in very late. But today with Gen AI, you can predict or kind of anticipate what that could happen in like 3-5 years ahead, and that can be figured out sooner with very high tech, these LLMs and algorithms, which can make a big impact and a better community and the ecosystem. So it's very exciting. And
Yeah.
the other part I want to add also to your question on the people's trust. I think when you are sharing some sensitive data, especially, I think the having the right guardrails and bringing the trust and reducing the hallucination and providing the right insights to those CISOs is very important, because are they actionable? Are they able to react or make an impact? And in that journey, agentic AI is even more very valuable, because it kind of tells you, not only tells, but it also kind of try to go and address those problems. So it's an exciting journey for us.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great insight, Vijay. And to build on that, I think this predictive nature of AI is certainly powerful. And if we apply this to cybersecurity, Vinay, question to you first, which is um, obviously there's a lot of promise. I think people want to be able to predict where the attack might come from, which systems might be vulnerable, but those are all really hard problems. And so for someone who's looking at Gen AI solution, and it looks like there are people who are some portion of these people are considering a pilot. What problems should they be aware of ahead of time that they will encounter along their way while adopting this Gen AI product?
Yeah. I mean, two comments over here, right? Like, first, it's the problem is actually hard, but we are actually finding the right kind of tools to actually solve this problem, which is actually a great promise, right? The models are evolving and the data is actually available to, again, the general models are actually evolving really well, right? But I would actually say this, having personally experienced this, don't get just carried away by the capabilities of the general models. The creativity of the general models is fantastic, but what really matters is, how do we get to the problem of, like, just stop describing the security problems and start solving them, right? This is where the key is to understand, like, what kind of data do you have? How have you structured it? How have you actually put together? How have you made this available in a structured format to your, the Gen AI models? Have you understood and kind of like articulated or, architected your multi-agent models in a manner where the responses and the solutions that you're actually getting is actionable, appropriate, accurate, and which makes sense at this point in time, right? So I would, again, for the last 25 years, I have been saying data, 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 right? Even the very first problem of, like, whatever we solved for the Wi-Fi, it's like, if you don't understand, like, what the signals are and what the noise is in various environments, you're going to design a very bad system. So understand your data, structure your data, make sure that the data is actually available to various agents in a clear, structured format, and then your Gen AI will work.
Makes sense. Gaurav, do you want to add anything to that? Any other problems other than making sure the data is structured?
I mean, Vinay, I think, did a pretty good job of covering it. And I think it really would come down to, you have two choices, right? Everybody has two choices. One choice is to try to build it on your own, right? And the other choice is to partner with somebody who's kind of sort of done it before, like a vendor, right? And like Balbix, okay. But without really getting into the Balbix aspect of it at this point of time, I just want to point out that it is definitely possible to build something like this on your own. Right? It's I think Vinay kind of outlined the strategy of how to do that. Right? You have to get your data together. You have to understand. You have to use AI to get your data together. So Vinay missed that piece, right? Um, Gen AI and other types of structured AI is necessary to get this data together, right? And there's lots of opportunity over there. That part is a lot harder than just building an agentic system, right? That part is a lot harder than picking a language model and saying, okay, I'm going to send you messages of putting 5 agents together with 3 or 4 different language models and stringing them together. So the stringing them together seemed like very easy to do, but the real part is getting the data clean, right? That's it. And then once you start programming the system, be prepared to the fact that all the problems that BJ mentioned earlier, how will you reduce the rate of the hallucination, right? How do you make the model be repeatable, right? So I'll give you one example, and you guys can try it out very quickly at home, right? Ask ChatGPT to answer a question. Then a few minutes later, ask it exactly the same question, and then ask it exactly the same question all over again, right? And you will get 3 different flavors of answers, right? Now imagine if you ask for a daily report, a daily risk report, and the format of that daily risk report and the content was changing every day, right? That would not work in the enterprise, right? You've agreed to a certain set of metrics. You want to see those same metrics over repeatedly. Now, it is very possible to instruct the model to do that, but those are some of the challenges that you will have to run into, right? And
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff which is that it is possible to build this thing on your own, but it is not trivial. It's actually very expensive. And I'll just share this one anecdote that a number of the Fortune 100 customers that we work with initially tried to build it on their own, and some of them actually succeeded in building a version 1. But it was very expensive, and maintaining it and keeping up with it and trying to add to it, like adding new data sources, was even more expensive. And it was only as useful or as good as the data sources. And then the real problem that people realized was in that the data was not clean.
Yeah.
So the whole system, even though it looked very beautiful and sexy and all that, it really was not very useful.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. Now there's an alternative, obviously, that we can talk about later, right?
Yeah. So I want to ask another question related to what you said, but just want to remind the audience to have any questions in case they have in the Q&A, and then we can start taking them now as we move towards the last few questions. So you talked a little bit about hallucination, and Vinay, you had a few weeks back you had said that the LLMs are meant to hallucinate if it's done right. But it's a big deal, right? Gaurav was suggesting that you can't, if you're presenting a risk report to your board, you can't afford to provide data or information that is inaccurate. How do you balance the inherent nature with what is the desire of the person who is building this or considering this?
Yeah. So let me ask you this question, right?
Don't ask me. I'm just.
I will ask you this question. You come to me and you say, like, Vinay, this is a discussion that I want to have with you. And every time you come and say, I have a discussion that I want to have with you, I say, like, bullet number 1, bullet number 2, bullet number 3, bullet number 4. You're like, man, this guy is a robot. I am not getting anything creative out of him. Then you come and say, like, Vinay, I want to understand what is actually happening in engineering. Can you give me a report? Every time I give you a report, it's very different. It's like, Vinay, you're confusing the heck out of me. Why don't you actually keep this straight? Controlled hallucinations are the key, right? Like, you need the creativity of the LLM that we have actually learned from, like, terabytes, petabytes of data. But at the same time, you cannot make up factual stuff. You have to be very careful. And then you have to be able to instruct the LLM that, hey, this is, keep your creativity to limited extent over here, because this is a report that I want to generate. And there is a certain expectation as to, like, how this format should look like. So hallucination is, you can actually think about hallucination in different ways, right? Like when you're doing hallucination, right, it's called creativity. When you're doing it wrong, it's called hallucination. So you just have to actually program the system to get it right. And I will add one more to Gaurav's point as to, like, why programming these things, understanding the data, keeping it structured, and using the right kind of tools right kind of AI tools to generate this data, and then keeping the format straight in your head is important. It's not easy. I mean, this is important, but it can be done.
Vijay, one question for you, which is about we have gone from thinking about the limitations to the use cases and the different problems to hallucinations. Tell us a little bit about NVIDIA's role in the GenAI ecosystem. I know there's obviously a lot of tech involved, pretty differentiated ones, cutting edge ones. Just kind of give us a high-level overview of which ones are you most excited about, and what is it capable of doing that helps cybersecurity professionals the most?
Yeah, I'll try to break it down into two parts. First, in general, GenAI, how NVIDIA is adding value, and I'll talk a little bit more on the cybersec. Again, as you are pretty much very well aware, I mean, NVIDIA provides mainly high performance GPUs. And as we go along, this is not something last couple of years, but we're talking like we go back to the transformer and the ChatGPT moment happened. And NVIDIA had been working with like OpenAI for a few years to make that happen. So I think as the data, as Gaurav was referring, is going to be enormous, and there's new set of data and different multi-models of text, image, videos that come along. There's a lot of computation that's required, and training the data needs a lot of compute. And also, once you train the data, you need inferencing that to kind of avoid those hallucination and provide right insights and making that outcome of whatever the question being asked or the request is providing the right answers and right outcome. There's a lot of inferencing in the right way. So NVIDIA provides end-to-end platform called NeMo, which kind of talks through all the way from data curation, model training, fine-tuning, and there's a lot of guardrails and inferencing part of it. And I think it's an end-to-end product, platform stack, which helps enables startups, enterprises across. It's a full stack solution. And I think in general, if you look, NVIDIA has been like partner-enabled approach where we are taking all the partners all the way from different verticals across the point I mentioned, and helping enabling them and working together with them to drive this Gen AI and this wave of AI that's happening as we go along. So providing the right infrastructure, at the same time the ecosystem to make this happen. And as we see every day, there is new models, new way of doing it, faster, efficient. And again, at the end of the day, how can we get maximum tokens at the least cost, reduce the TCO, bring that value to those enterprises is very, very valuable. So if you tie this to this cybersec, I think there's a lot of exciting times with respect to confidential computing or in general cybersec. Or overall, again, there are multiple use cases across it. But in particular, since we're talking about Balbix here, so I think to get those right reports, fine-tuning the models based on the industry specific, which will help provide the right insights, and how those insights are more actionable, I think is critical. And that's where the expertise from the respective teams who are developing is helpful. And NVIDIA partners with all these different players across the ecosystem to kind of help enable them in whatever ways from the whole end-to-end hardware or software stack point of view.
Makes sense. Yeah, thanks so much, Vijay. We obviously keep our eye out on the latest and the greatest ones, but that's good to get a quick summary on what is awesome that we should watch out for. I have a couple of audience questions that I want to make sure that we cover, even though they're answered online, just so that people can hear them more clearly before we get to our last few questions. So first question that I wanted to bring up, again, all of you guys can, or any of you guys can answer, which is about how do you protect against the unintentional misuse and exposure of data that's accessible to GenAI? Any thoughts?
So I think this is a great question, right? And as is true and forget GenAI, right? I mean, this is true. This is a requirement for anything in the enterprise. when like you have your human resource data, your salary information, your medical records, and the enterprise, this is a fairly well understood problem. It's a problem of access control. It's a problem of roles-based access control. It's a problem of assigning RBAC roles to the different people who can access. Like you are not just a user; you're a user with a role and a certain scope of that. So uh, just like you have RBAC for your HR systems and for and you might have different layers of authentication that are needed depending on the kind of data that you're looking at. The same problem needs to be solved for any kind of a GenAI based system, either a cybersecurity or otherwise, right? And it's as simple as that, right? I mean, it's a well understood problem. It has to be solved again.
Makes sense.
Now,
Uh,
the opportunity over there obviously is that can you use GenAI to help you solve these problems? And it actually turns out that yes, and with with the online learning that is happening, as the training cost of these things go down, you can be learning on in a private mode for a different type of people who are doing different types of access to the system, and that's the wild west right now, cutting edge, bleeding edge work that's happening, which is that the RBAC model itself is very dynamic. Right?
Yeah, and adding on to that as well, right? I mean, there are maybe mainly two phases of where you can take care of this data, especially when you're training the data model, right? So how can you train relevant data but still not compromise with your PII or PHI data? I think that's very important. But the data training of that model has to be relevant. Otherwise, there is a lot of hallucination. And to the other side of the spectrum, when we are inferencing or using the RAG approach or the agentic approach, where we feed enterprise or private data, how can you make sure the model, assuming you are going through APIs, so how can you not expose your private data to those systems and still get the relevant outcome which you're looking for? I think those two, with right guardrails and the right agents that can help produce those outcome, is critical for this, for the system.
Makes sense. Second question is, what would be challenges to be aware of for an open source AI platform if someone is considering them?
Yeah. I mean, I can list a ton over here. This probably requires we can do another webinar on this, right? Like, just to list a few, I mean, I'll touch upon this at a high level. How do you prevent the model extraction and poisoning, right? Model extraction attacks are actually becoming, OpenAI, open AI models, not open AI, right? Are very susceptible to this, right? Like attackers can replicate the model, query it repeatedly, reconstruct its behavior, right? And then they can figure out as to like, how do you bypass the cybersecurity controls over there, right? Or security controls. Model poisoning, you have to know like who actually is training the model, what is the hash of the model that you're actually getting, right? Is this relevant? Is this not relevant? Because backdoors or malicious weights, attack patterns that are actually injected, these are actually the common things that can happen and you need to be aware of it. The key is to understand like, okay, where is the source of this coming from, right? And that leads us to the next one, which is essentially the supply chain. You have to, again, understand like where the training data is actually sourced from, right? Is this actually poisoned? Is this not poisoned? This is not specific to Gen AI. This is generic to any AI model. If you poison the data, you can actually make it do things that are not right.
One more comment on this is that think about it, right? And this is, when an open source model comes out, people say, well, it's open source, therefore it can be verified. And the reason we kind of people say, well, let's look at open source code like Linux or the GNU stuff, right? And I can eyeball the source code and say, yeah, I know this is good code, but there's no backdoor in there. And yet, as we know, right, open source code does have vulnerabilities, and oftentimes there's nobody to fix those vulnerabilities. And I mean, that's the reason why you buy support, you go with vendors that offers to support your open source software, right? As opposed to some people support it on their own because they have the capabilities, right?
Mhm.
Those kind of considerations get compounded 100,000 times. I mean, if you look at Llama 5 and talk about, I'm going to verify Llama 5, okay, tell me how. Like, tell me what queries can you put it out to make sure it's not poisoned? I mean, I'm not saying Llama 5 is poisoned, but a variant, a clone of an open source model could very easily be poisoned and touted as better. And
Mhm.
it's not trivial. I mean, it's like there is no liability over there. So all the rule of law, when you have a vendor with a proprietary system, all of those things are there. So it's really something like, I'm not saying open source is bad, by the way. I mean, we're big fans of open source, but these are all considerations that you should go in with. Like, how am I going to verify this open source model?
Yeah, and adding on to is the opportunity cost, right? So, do you have those capabilities? Do you have those, people, expertise who can help take the open source thing, or you want to work with a vendor who has that expertise? A combination of that also is, I mean, every day something is new. So, are you willing to keep up with that intensity and that innovations that are coming, and can you continue with your business, what you're doing? So, I think that's a combination, and it's a decision that company has to make on their what is that they want to pursue, or they want to. It's there are two very good arguments on the both sides of the equation. So
Absolutely, that makes sense. So that comes to sort of the final question, which is we have lots of ideas. We talked about the limitations, we talked about the challenges, the open source. What do companies and organizations need? There's a lot to be able to do to get started. Clearly not for the faint of heart, but for those who have a use case in production and pilot, they may already be aware of these challenges. Somebody who have multiple use cases may have been experiencing these challenges. But for a lot of others who haven't gotten started yet or interested in getting started, what's your recommendation? Should they wait a couple more years? Should they start now? And if they start now, where should they start?
Well, I mean, my view on this is very simple, right? We are in the middle of a revolution. It's like a revolution that is perhaps even bigger than the mobile revolution or the internet revolution, because these revolutions tend to compound themselves, generally speaking. So I'm actually going to go back a longer time, and I'm going to compare it to the Industrial Revolution, right? Because this is kind of like that. Now, prior to the Industrial Revolution, horses were very important. So there are a few 100,000 horses in the United States, and there was a horse ecosystem, right? People who knew how to ride horses, care for horses, treat horses when they got sick, clean the stables of horses, um, ride horses really fast, ride horses slowly, that kind of stuff, right? Ride horses in a carriage, ride horses to deliver mail. That was the horse ecosystem. And it was fundamental to the economy, right? That's how we move fast, right? Now, a few years later, when the Industrial Revolution was well underway, there were less than 20,000, 15,000 horses left in the United States. And the horse industry disappeared. And it was very clear, right? Why? Because anything steam engine, the gas, and later on the internal combustion engine, they completely change the way you do transportation, the way the economy works, right? So all of these, if you were a horseman at that time and you were resisting the revolution that was happening, or you were allowing it to pass you by, what would end up happening is you would not have a job, and you would have a job, but you would be competing against steam engines, and you would be kind of like a relic, like the kind of horses that you see around Central Park in New York, and you get on them and you feel good about riding in a buggy, right? And that's the only job of horses or recreation, right? But the fundamental being the backbone of the economy, that went away. We are in the same boat right now, and we are in the same kind of a situation right now. If you think, if you're in cybersecurity and if you think you can afford to sit out AI for another 6 months, think again.
Yeah. And the only thing that I'll say is whether you know it or not, you're using AI. It's about like embracing, and do you want to take control of it?
Yeah, and adding on to that, I mean, there's a lot of agentic AI. I mean, again, there are different spectrum of companies on different spaces or in the whole ecosystem, but AI in general is impacting all industries. It's not just one industry. So it's important, again, they understand, and there's a lot of value with they talk about code gen, for example, 80-90% of the code you want to generate is pretty much done for you, and you can just validate. So there's a lot more value, and again, it's an opportunity cost. They want to act now versus later, but and again, you want to do by yourself or with somebody working with the APIs or any of those. So it's a decision that management has to make, but I guess it's better to act faster. So
Yeah, this is all great advice. Somebody was telling me about AI horsepower yesterday, so now I'm wondering what were they talking about. But you didn't answer the second question, which is more important, like how do you get started?
So I'll take a stab. You guys can share your point of view. I mean, again, it all depends on what experience and expertise you have. What's your problem statement, right? As a company, if you're a cybersecurity, what is that you're looking for? Like, what are your key KPIs or metrics you're looking for? Or if you're a healthcare, what is that something you're trying to solve, and how fast you want to get those results? So combination of that. So you want to choose, like, you want to, like, again, I think there is quite a bit of very few companies which are on the model development and model training and creating their own, but most of the spectrum is on the enterprises or the customers who are taking the AI and applying it to their business. I think so. If that is the spectrum which most of those companies fall in, then I think again, make a choice. You want to have your own team and build in house, or you want to work with like use the APIs or use the microservices and take it forward, or you want to outsource to a third party where you can focus on the business and get the best from the experts. Again, all three options are possible, but it's your decision at the end of the day. But there are a lot of tools and solutions. There are a lot of blueprints. There are a lot of reference architectures out there from both open source and cloud source on different combinations. So it's again, there's a lot more information out there. It's again where they want to start and what they want to do with it.
Makes sense. Gaurav, where did they get started?
Just get started. There is no think over here. We are happy to help. I mean, and particularly if you're getting started in cybersecurity, you're happy to help. Just reach out. We'll help you.
Awesome. All right, with this great parting words of we could help you get started, or just get started. There's lots of information out there. Thanks everyone for joining. We appreciate your time this morning, and hopefully you took away some insights, information that'll help you on the GenAI journey, and you will receive a recording of this webinar, and look forward to seeing you another one very soon. Thanks everyone. Thanks Vijay. Thanks Gaurav. Thanks Vinay.